I'm Dr. Reggie Ewesuedo. I've been with Lantern for about 18 months. Before Lantern, I've been in the industry for close to 25 years. Most of that experience has been both academia and early drug development in oncology. My subspecialty trainings were at the University of Chicago, where I majored in clinical pharmacology and hematology oncology. After that, I went on as a faculty at Ohio State University, and after about 2-3 years, I moved on to the industry where I worked at AstraZeneca, was heading the oncology group in experimental medicine. And after that stint, I went on to Genzyme and subsequently ended up in Pfizer. And I worked with other smaller companies before coming on to Lantern. But all through this period, it's been more of early clinical drug development and occasionally pivotal trials while I was in Pfizer. The Harmonic trial, well, is a combination of LP300 plus pemetrexed carboplatin. Now, pemetrexed carboplatin is the standard of care treatment in patients who have failed first-line treatment. In the design of Harmonic trial, the scientific rationale actually was based on retrospective analysis of some trials that had happened previously, especially in patients with non-small cell lung cancer. The population in that trial was really non-selective. It was all patients with non-small cell lung cancer. However, as you looked at retro analysis of some of the data, both in the studies done in the West as well as in Japan, there was an understanding very clearly from the data that patients that were never smokers with adenocarcinoma had a significant improvement in 2-year survival rates as well as their progression-free survival. The question then became, why are they never smokers? It is apparent now that never smokers with adenocarcinomas are predominantly patients that end up having the driver mutation subtype of non-small cell lung cancer. And we also have some preclinical data that have confirmed that LP300 also, as part of its mechanism of action, will modulate the tyrosine kinase receptors. So we're postulating in the design of this trial that never smokers who have failed tyrosine kinase inhibitors should benefit with LP300 and in combination with the standard of care currently, which is pemetrexed and carboplatin. So the study is designed as a randomized trial looking at LP300 in combination with that chemo doublet versus the chemo doublet as standard of care. As required by the regulators, whenever you have a new drug combination, one has to figure out the safety profile of that regimen. And this is what we've just completed. We looked at that triplet combination, just the safety profile, asking the question, is the regimen tolerable or not? And we've just completed that, and clearly we're really pleased with the safety profile we observed. So the combination of LP300 and the chemo doublet, which is pemetrexed and carboplatin, what we've found in this study so far is that this is a very safe and tolerable regimen. Most of the adverse events that we observed were mainly from the chemotherapy doublet, which is very encouraging, for us. But added to that really is the preliminary clinical benefit we are beginning to observe in the first 7 patients that were in this safety leading phase of the study. Interestingly, we found that 86% of the patients were deriving some form of clinical benefit, either by way of response or stable disease. And in the case of one patient, he's been on study now for more than a year with that regimen, and the doses have remained pretty much the same for all patients, which is unheard of in the field of combination therapies. The interesting thing to note also about the benefit and when it happens is that after 3 cycles of treatment, these patients, the majority of them, 6 out of the 7 patients, had some form of benefit, either by way of having significant tumor reduction, which equated to partial responses, they had metastatic sites that literally disappeared or resolved to normal in the case of lymph nodes with 3 of those patients. So overall, with a response rate of 43% and what we'll call a clinical benefit rate of 86%, this preliminary data leads us to believe that the regimen obviously has a place in this patient population. The never smokers who have failed tyrosine kinase inhibitors and are candidates for a pemetrexed carboplatin regimen. So the combination with LP300, we believe right now, just looking at the data, that this is very promising. So we're encouraging our sites and investigators to really ramp up the enrollment in the randomization phase of the study, for which we now have 2 patients, but there are more patients also in sites. So we've expanded the study to include Japan as well as Taiwan as countries for which we have 5 sites each in those countries. So our expectation is that before the end of the year, we'll have more data to validate this early experience that we're seeing with the regimen. So in terms of the data that we've collected so far in the safety leading phase, demographic-wise, it's really a mixture of males and females. These are patients, when we look at their prior treatment history, predominantly they failed osimertinib. In a few cases, they've had other therapies before osimertinib. And then in one case also, that patient had a RET rearrangement, so obviously the patient was not treated with osimertinib, but with the tyrosine kinase inhibitor as well. The interesting thing is, as we look at the data in terms of clinical benefit, it really didn't matter. Those demographics or prior treatment, all the patients have benefited. Interestingly, those with low and intermediate tumor mutational burden as well, which is kind of interesting to us, and we intend to pursue that line of thought by way of looking at the data further as we get into the randomization phase, with the intent that if the data holds up, then we plan to file for a breakthrough designation in that population. So far, the data is looking very encouraging. Some of the investigators that participated in the study in the US that we've shared the data with, they're excited about it. They think this is very encouraging, and if it holds up, this definitely will be a regimen to contend with in the second-line setting in this patient population. Now, one might ask, yes, it's a small number of patients. You're having a response rate of 43% in the absence of a randomized trial, what we want to have expected. When we look at the standard of care regimen, pemetrexed carboplatin, comparative data, historical data, be it as it may, the response rate for those regimens are usually around 20 to 30%. Progression-free survival in those patients is usually less than 6 months. In fact, it might be 4 months or 4.5 months in the case of pemetrexed carboplatin alone, and even in combination with IO agents, same patient population, the median progression-free survival is still less than 6 months. But from what we are seeing currently, we believe very strongly that this data, if it holds up, will obviously be better than what we know currently for the backbone chemotherapy. The Harmonic study design is in 2 phases. The first phase, which is the safety leading phase, is where we had enrolled or intended to enroll 6 patients, but we ended up enrolling 7 patients. And after that, we looked at the safety data and had meeting with the DSMB, and the regimen was found to be safe and tolerable, as I've explained previously. The next phase, which we are in now, is the randomization phase, a 2-to-1 randomization, and we are looking to enroll a total of about 90 patients. But there will be an interim analysis once we've observed about 30 events, either by way of PFS or survival events, or about 19 deaths. Currently, in terms of enrollment, we have 3 countries: the United States, Japan, and Taiwan. In Japan, we have 5 sites. About a month ago, we had the mini investigator meeting, And the investigators were all excited about the preliminary data that we have so far in the safety leading phase. And right now we have startup activities in Japan with the intention that we'll have patients enrolling in that study before the end of this year. The same is true of Taiwan as well. We met with some of the investigators in Taiwan. They're all excited about the study design and the preliminary data we've generated from the safety leading phase. And Taiwan should come on stream by the end of the year and beginning of next year in terms of enrollment of patients. So overall, we're expecting that by the first quarter of next year at the latest, we have substantial amount of clinical data for us to now validate what we've observed so far in the safety leading phase of the study. So just to put in a plug here for the trial, definitely the trial is published in the clinicaltrials.gov website. We also, if you look at Lantern Pharma website, we also have the trial there, and the Harmonic trial.com. And there's an app as well. But any information you need about this trial, you can contact Lantern Pharma, and we're more than happy to share with you the sites that are participating in this trial, so that if you have a patient, those patients also can be enrolled in the trial.